I was ready for my raise. The only one who wasn't, apparently, was my wife. Let me back up. My name is David Harper, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Decent job as creative director at TechFlow Solutions, a company my wife Laura built from the ground up. Nice house in the suburbs. A marriage that seemed solid, even if it had gotten a little predictable after 8 years. The thing about being married to your boss is that you never really know where the professional relationship ends and the personal one begins. Laura always said she kept things separate, but sitting in that glass-walled conference room on a Tuesday morning in March, watching her avoid my eyes while Mark Foster, her golden boy VP, smirked at me across the polished table, I realized how naive I'd been. So, Laura said, her voice crisp and professional, I've made some decisions about the restructuring. I straightened in my chair. We'd talked about this at home. My promotion to senior creative director was supposed to be a done deal. I'd been running the creative department for 3 years, pulling in major clients, working 60-hour weeks. The raise would bump me up to $85,000, not Fortune 500 money, but enough to finally start thinking about kids, maybe take that vacation to Ireland we'd been planning. Mark will be taking over as Vice President of Creative Operations, Laura continued, sliding a folder across the table. His vision for the department aligns perfectly with our growth strategy. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked at Mark, who was trying to suppress a grin. 28 years old, MBA from some fancy school, been with the company exactly 18 months. His biggest creative achievement was redesigning the office coffee station. What about the senior director position? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Laura finally looked at me, and there was something cold in her eyes I'd never seen before. We've decided to eliminate that role. Budget constraints. Budget constraints? I couldn't help the sarcasm creeping into my voice. While promoting Mark to VP? The VP role comes with additional responsibilities that justify the investment, she said. Mark will be overseeing not just creative but also client relations and strategic partnerships. Ava Chen from HR cleared her throat. David, we've prepared a compensation adjustment for your current role. A modest increase to reflect your continued contributions. She slid another folder toward me. I opened it and stared at the number. $42,000. A $2,000 raise. Less than what I'd made 5 years ago. This is a joke, right? I looked around the table. Laura's expression was stone. Mark was studying his fingernails. Ava looked uncomfortable but determined. The market analysis shows... Ava began. The market analysis shows I'm worth half what you're paying the guy who just got promoted over me. I stood up, the chair rolling back and hitting the glass wall with a sharp crack. The guy who's been here less than 2 years? David? Laura's voice carried a warning. Let's keep this professional. Professional. Right. Because there was nothing personal about watching your wife hand your career to some smooth-talking kid who probably couldn't design a business card without help. You know what? I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. Keep your modest increase. I'll find somewhere that actually values experience. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Mark was grinning openly now. Congratulations on your promotion, Mark, I said. I'm sure you'll do great things. Just remember, what goes around comes around. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and I found myself standing in the hallway, heart pounding, career imploding, while 23 employees pretended not to stare. If they wanted a villain, I'd audition for the part. 3 hours later, I was nursing my second beer at Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar 6 blocks from the TechFlow office. The place smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams, which felt about right for my mood. Gina Murphy, the owner, was a 60-something former Marine who'd bought the place with her retirement money and turned it into an unofficial headquarters for everyone who worked in the downtown business district. She knew more secrets than a priest and had less reason to keep them confidential. You look like someone ran over your dog, she said, wiping down a glass with practiced efficiency. Worse. Someone ran over my career. Let me guess. That pretty wife of yours finally showed her true colors. I looked up sharply. Gina was watching me with knowing eyes. What's that supposed to mean? Honey, I've been serving drinks to the TechFlow crowd for 3 years. You think I don't hear things? She leaned across the bar, lowering her voice. Your boy Mark's been in here plenty of times, usually with company executives. Always picking up the tab. Always talking about his big plans for the future. What kind of plans? The kind that don't include you, apparently. She refilled my beer without being asked. He was in here last week, celebrating something with a couple of the board members. Said he was about to get everything he'd been working toward. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. How long has this been going on? The plotting? Couple of months, maybe more. Gina glanced around the nearly empty bar, then leaned closer. But if you want my opinion, there's more to it than just business. Meaning what? Meaning your wife and golden boy Mark have been seen together outside of work hours. A lot. The beer turned sour in my mouth. Seen where? The Marriott downtown. That fancy steakhouse on 5th Street. Always very careful, very discreet, but not careful enough. She straightened up, her expression sympathetic. I'm sorry, David. I know this isn't what you want to hear. I sat there for a long moment, processing. My wife was sleeping with Mark. My wife was sleeping with Mark and giving him my promotion. My wife was sleeping with Mark, giving him my promotion, and expecting me to smile and take a pay cut. Gina, I said finally. You know Shane Rodriguez, right? The private investigator? Sure, he's in here most Friday nights. Why? Think you could give him my number? Tell him I might have some work for him? She smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Honey, I think that's the smartest thing you've said all day. My phone buzzed. A text from Laura. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. I showed Gina the message. She shook her head. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. I finished my beer and left a 20 on the bar. Thanks for the information. David? She called after me as I headed for the door. Whatever you're thinking about doing, be smart about it. The best revenge is the kind they never see coming. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not anger. I'd been angry in the conference room. This was colder, more focused. This was the feeling I used to get in Afghanistan when we were planning a particularly complex operation. Every detail mattered. Every angle had to be covered. And when you struck, it had to be decisive. Laura thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was about to learn that I'd been letting her win. Shane Rodriguez looked exactly like you'd expect a private investigator to look. Rumpled shirt, 5 o'clock shadow at 2 in the afternoon, and eyes that had seen too much of the world's ugliness. We'd served together in the 82nd Airborne, and he'd saved my life during a particularly nasty firefight outside Kandahar. I'd returned the favor 6 months later. That kind of bond doesn't break, even when you're asking your buddy to help you spy on your cheating wife. So let me get this straight, Shane said, stirring sugar into his coffee. We were sitting in a diner across town, far from anywhere the TechFlow crowd might show up. Your wife promotes her boyfriend over you, cuts your salary, and now you want me to document their affair? That's the basic idea. And then what? Divorce court? I shook my head. I'm thinking bigger than that. Shane leaned back in the booth, studying my face. Okay, I'll bite. What's the plan? Laura built TechFlow on the idea of ethical business practices. It's literally in their mission statement. The board of directors takes that stuff seriously. Half of them are old-school types who still believe in handshake deals and keeping your word. I pulled out my phone and showed him the company website. See this? Integrity in all our professional and personal relationships. So if the CEO is sleeping with an employee and showing favoritism, it violates about 6 different company policies. Plus, if I can prove Mark's promotion was based on personal rather than professional reasons, I've got grounds for a discrimination lawsuit that would cost them millions. Shane grinned. Now you're talking my language. What do you need? Photos. Video, if possible. Documentation of their meetings, where they go, how often they're together. I also need you to dig into Mark's background, employment history, education, anything that might show he's not qualified for the position. That's going to take time. And money. I pulled out an envelope containing $5,000 in cash, my entire emergency fund. This should cover the first week. If we find what I think we're going to find, there'll be more. Shane pocketed the money. Consider it done. But David, you need to be prepared for what we might discover. Sometimes the truth is uglier than you expect. It can't be uglier than sitting in that conference room and watching my wife hand my career to her boyfriend. Fair enough. He stood up and threw a 10 on the table. I'll start tonight. Laura's working late, right? According to her text. Perfect. I'll follow her after she leaves the office, see where she really goes. He paused at the edge of the booth. One more thing. While I'm gathering evidence, you need to act normal. Don't change your routine. Don't let on that you suspect anything. Can you do that? I thought about going home to my empty house, microwaving dinner for one, pretending everything was fine when Laura eventually came home smelling like another man's cologne. I'm a better actor than you might think. Acting normal turned out to be easier than expected, mainly because Laura barely spoke to me anymore. She'd come home around midnight, claiming she'd been working on the Henderson account or reviewing quarterly reports. She'd shower immediately, long day, need to wash off the stress, and be asleep before I could ask any questions. In the mornings, she was all business. Coffee, quick scan of emails, perfunctory kiss on the cheek before heading out the door. We were like polite strangers sharing a house. Meanwhile, Shane was earning his money. Every day brought new intelligence, Laura and Mark having lunch at restaurants across town. Mark's car parked outside Laura's office building until well past business hours. The two of them checking into the Marriott downtown, always paying cash, always using Mark's name on the registration. But Shane's best discovery came on Thursday. You need to see this, he said, sliding a manila envelope across my kitchen table. Inside were photos of Laura and Mark at a coffee shop, heads close together, looking at what appeared to be business documents. So they're working together. That's not exactly smoking gun material. Look closer at the papers. I squinted at the photos. The documents were partially visible, and I could make out the TechFlow letterhead and what looked like financial projections. Those are the budget reports for next quarter, Shane continued, including salary information for every employee in the company. See the date on the newspaper in the background? This meeting happened 2 weeks before your promotion review. The implications hit me immediately. Laura and Mark had been planning my demotion for weeks, maybe months. They'd calculated exactly how much money they could save by keeping me in my current role and how much they could justify spending on Mark's new position. There's more, Shane said. I did some digging into Mark's background. That MBA he claims to have, it's from an online program that's not accredited. His previous job experience, he was fired from his last 2 positions for performance issues. Can you prove that? I've got copies of his employment records. Turns out his former supervisors are very willing to talk about their experiences with Mark Foster. Apparently, he has a pattern of sleeping his way up the corporate ladder. I stared at the photos, feeling that cold focus settling over me again. Laura hadn't just betrayed our marriage, she'd betrayed every principle she claimed to believe in. She'd compromised the integrity of her own company for a pretty face and whatever Mark was doing for her behind closed doors. What's our next move? Shane asked. We need something bigger. Something that can't be explained away or covered up. I gathered the photos and slipped them back into the envelope. How do you feel about a little breaking and entering? Depends on what we're breaking into and how illegal you want this to get. Mark's apartment. I want to see what he's got on his computer, his phone. Maybe find some evidence of their relationship that Laura can't deny. Shane shook his head. That's a felony, David. If we get caught, all the evidence we've gathered becomes inadmissible. Plus, you'd be looking at serious jail time. Then we don't get caught. It's not that simple. Even if we find something, how do we explain how we got it? Any lawyer worth his retainer would get it thrown out in 5 minutes. I sat back in my chair, frustrated. Shane was right, of course. I needed evidence that could be obtained legally, or at least evidence that could be presented without revealing how it was acquired. What if we didn't have to break in? I said slowly. What if someone invited us? What are you talking about? Mark's having a party this Saturday night. I heard him talking about it at the office. Big celebration for his promotion. Half the company's going to be there. Shane caught on immediately. And if we happen to be guests at this party, and we happen to notice some interesting documents lying around, or if someone accidentally left their laptop open, exactly. We'd just be observant party guests. There's still the problem of getting invited. I'm guessing you're not on Mark's guest list. I smiled for the first time in days. Leave that to me. I think it's time to start playing the game by their rules. Friday morning, I walked into the TechFlow office like nothing had changed. I nodded to the receptionist, grabbed coffee from the break room, and settled into my cubicle like I had for the past 3 years. The only difference was the small recording device Shane had given me, tucked discreetly into my shirt pocket. Around 10 o'clock, Mark strolled through the creative department, making his rounds like a politician working a crowd. He was wearing a new suit, expensive, probably Italian, and his confidence was practically radiating off him. "David," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "How are you adjusting to the new structure?" "Just fine, Mark. Congratulations again on the promotion. You must be pretty excited." "Thanks, man. I really appreciate that." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I know this transition might be awkward, but I want you to know there are no hard feelings on my end. We're all part of the same team here." "Absolutely. Team players, that's what we are." I paused, as if struck by a sudden thought. "Hey, I heard you're having a celebration party tomorrow night." "That sounds like fun." Mark's expression flickered for just a moment. Surprise, maybe annoyance, before the smile returned. "Yeah, just a small gathering. Nothing too fancy." "Well, I hope you have a great time." "You've certainly earned it." I turned back to my computer, dismissing him, but I could feel Mark standing there, uncertain. He'd been expecting anger, resentment, maybe even a confrontation. My casual acceptance was throwing him off balance. "Actually," he said after a moment, "you should come. Both you and Laura. The more the merrier, right?" "Perfect." "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "No imposition at all. It's at my place. Starts around 8. I'll text you the address." Looking forward to it. After Mark walked away, I allowed myself a small smile. He'd just invited me to gather evidence of his own downfall. Sometimes the best traps are the ones people walk into willingly. The rest of the day passed quietly. Laura was in back-to-back meetings, which gave me time to observe the office dynamics I'd been too focused on my own work to notice before. Mark spent a lot of time in Laura's office with the door closed. Ava from HR made several trips to the executive wing, always carrying confidential files, and there were whispered conversations that stopped whenever I walked by. I was beginning to understand that my demotion wasn't just about Laura's affair with Mark. This was a systematic restructuring designed to push me out of the company entirely. The question was why? What did I know, or what did they think I knew, that made me a threat? That evening, Laura came home around 7, earlier than she'd been arriving lately. "How was your day?" she asked, the question automatic and disinterested. "Pretty good, actually. Mark invited us to his party tomorrow night." She looked up sharply from her phone. "What party?" "The celebration party for his promotion. He said it starts at 8. I watched her face carefully. "You didn't know about it?" "Of course I knew about it. I wasn't sure if we should go. It might be awkward for you." "Why would it be awkward?" "Mark got promoted. I'm happy for him." "We're all adults here." Laura studied my face, clearly trying to figure out what I was really thinking. After 8 years of marriage, she knew me well enough to recognize when I was up to something. But she also knew that refusing to go to the party would raise questions she didn't want to answer. "Okay," she said finally. "We'll go. But just for an hour or two." "Perfect. It'll be nice to see everyone outside the office." That night, as Laura slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and ran through the plan. Shane would arrive at the party separately, posing as someone's guest. While everyone was drinking and celebrating, we'd look for evidence, documents, emails, anything that could prove the extent of Laura and Mark's relationship and its impact on company decisions. It was risky. If we were caught, it would be my word against theirs, and I was already the disgruntled employee with a grudge. But if we found what I thought we'd find, it would be worth the risk. Tomorrow night, the game would really begin. Mark's apartment was exactly what I'd expected: sleek, modern, and expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the downtown skyline, and the furniture looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. The kind of place that screamed, "I'm successful and single" to anyone who walked through the door. The party was in full swing when Laura and I arrived. 20-something employees from TechFlow were scattered around the living room, drinks in hand, laughing at Mark's jokes and congratulating him on his promotion. I recognized most of the faces: account executives, junior developers, a few people from marketing. "David! Laura! You made it!" Mark appeared at our side immediately, playing the gracious host. He was wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, and I noticed he'd gotten a haircut since yesterday. Everything about him radiated success and confidence. "Thanks for inviting us," Laura said, accepting a glass of wine from the server Mark had hired for the evening. "Your place is beautiful." "Just a little something I picked up last year." "Great investment property." Mark's smile was practiced, perfect. "David, what can I get you to drink?" "Beer's fine. Whatever you've got." As Mark headed toward the kitchen, I caught Shane's eye across the room. He was standing near the bookshelf, nursing a whiskey and talking to someone from accounting. He gave me an almost imperceptible nod. The party continued around us, conversations about work, weekend plans, the latest Netflix series everyone was watching. Laura seemed relaxed for the first time in weeks, laughing at stories and mingling with employees she rarely interacted with outside the office. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was genuinely enjoying herself. But I was watching for something else. The glances between Laura and Mark when they thought no one was looking. The way Mark's hand lingered on her shoulder when he passed behind her chair. The subtle intimacy that exists between people who know each other's bodies as well as their minds. Around 10 o'clock, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Mark's bedroom was down a short hallway, and his home office was right next to it. The door was closed, but not locked. Inside, Mark's desk was covered with papers: contracts, budget reports, employee evaluations. I quickly scanned the documents, looking for anything related to my demotion or the company restructuring. Most of it was routine business, but then I found something interesting: a handwritten note tucked under a stack of invoices. DH, performance issues, attitude problems, recommend termination after probationary period. DH David Harper. Mark had been planning to fire me all along. The demotion was just the first step. I took a photo of the note with my phone, then continued searching. In the desk drawer, I found a folder labeled Personnel Changes that contained detailed plans for restructuring the entire creative department. My position was marked for elimination within 6 months. 2 other employees were also targeted for termination, apparently to make room for people Mark wanted to bring in. Find anything interesting? I spun around. Shane was standing in the doorway, holding his drink and looking casual. "More than I expected," I whispered, showing him the photos on my phone. "Good. I found something too." He held up a flash drive. Mark's laptop was sitting open in the living room. Amazing how trusting people get when they've been drinking. I copied his hard drive. "What's on it?" "We'll find out later." Right now, We need to get out of here before someone notices we're both missing. I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it and followed Shane out of the office. We separated in the hallway. He headed back to the living room while I actually used the bathroom, establishing my alibi. When I rejoined the party, Laura was deep in conversation with Ava and a couple of other employees. Mark was holding court near the windows, telling some story that had everyone laughing. Everything seemed normal. "Ready to head home?" I asked Laura during a lull in the conversation. "Already? We just got here. It's almost 11. I'm getting tired." She looked annoyed but didn't argue. We said our goodbyes, thanked Mark for his hospitality, and headed for the elevator. "That was fun," Laura said as we waited for the car. "Mark really knows how to throw a party." "Yeah, he's quite the host." I pressed the button for the parking garage. "Did you have a good time?" "I did, actually. It's nice to see everyone relaxed and social instead of stressed about deadlines." The elevator doors opened, and we walked toward our car in comfortable silence. Laura seemed genuinely happy, which made what I was about to do that much more difficult. But as we drove home through the empty streets, I thought about the note in Mark's desk and the folder full of termination plans. Laura wasn't just cheating on me, she was actively participating in destroying my career and the careers of other innocent employees. Whatever sympathy I might have felt for her evaporated. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Sunday morning, Shane and I met at the diner again to review what we'd found at Mark's party. The flash drive contained more than either of us had hoped for: emails, financial documents, and a folder labeled L and M Personal that made my stomach turn. "You sure you want to see this?" Shane asked, his finger hovering over the mouse. "Show me everything." The personal folder contained photos of Laura and Mark together, not just professional meetings, but intimate moments. Laura laughing at dinner, Mark's arm around her shoulders. The two of them in what was clearly a hotel room, Mark kissing her neck while she smiled at the camera. But the worst part was the timestamps. The earliest photos were dated 6 months ago, which meant their affair had been going on long before my promotion review. They'd been planning my downfall while pretending everything was normal at home. "There's more," Shane said, clicking on a subfolder labeled Business Plans. Inside were detailed financial projections showing how much money TechFlow could save by eliminating my position and 2 others. Mark had calculated that the savings would more than cover his new salary and benefits package. "He's been planning this for months," I said, staring at the spreadsheets. Every detail, every cost analysis. This wasn't just about getting promoted. It was about restructuring the entire company to benefit himself. And Laura signed off on all of it. Shane pointed to the email signatures on several documents. "Look at this one." The email was from Laura to Mark, dated 3 weeks before my promotion review. "I agree with your assessment of the personnel situation. David has become complacent, and his attitude toward change is problematic. Proceed with your recommendations." I read the message twice, letting the words sink in. Complacent. Problematic. 8 years of marriage, and this was how my wife really saw me. "David," Shane said quietly, "there's something else." The financial records show some irregularities in Mark's expense reports. He's been charging personal expenses to the company, dinners, hotel rooms, even some of those clothes he's been wearing. How much are we talking about? Over the past 6 months? Maybe $15,000. Not enough to bankrupt the company, but definitely enough to constitute embezzlement if it can be proven. I leaned back in the booth, processing everything we'd discovered. Laura and Mark weren't just having an affair, they were defrauding the company, manipulating personnel decisions for personal gain, and planning to destroy the careers of multiple employees. "What's our next move?" Shane asked. "We need to be smart about this. If we go to the board of directors with accusations, they'll want proof. And if Laura and Mark realize what we know, they'll destroy the evidence and probably fire me immediately. So, what do you suggest?" I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "We're going to give them exactly what they want. I'm going to quit." Shane looked confused. That doesn't sound like revenge. That sounds like surrender. Trust me on this. If I quit voluntarily, they'll let their guard down. They'll think they've won, and people get sloppy when they think they're safe. I pulled out my phone and started typing. I'm going to send Laura an email right now, telling her I've decided to pursue other opportunities, and I'll be giving my 2 weeks' notice tomorrow. And then what? Then we wait. Mark will want to celebrate his victory, and Laura will want to move quickly to implement their restructuring plans. They'll get careless, and when they do, we'll be ready. I sent the email and put my phone away. In the meantime, I need you to keep monitoring their communications. If Mark's been stupid enough to keep evidence of his embezzlement on his computer, there might be more we haven't found yet. What about the other employees who are targeted for termination? Shouldn't we warn them? Not yet. If they start acting suspicious or defensive, it'll tip off Laura and Mark that someone knows about their plans. I stood up and threw money on the table. Right now, the element of surprise is our biggest advantage. Let's not waste it. As I drove home, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For the first time in weeks, I was in control of the situation. Laura and Mark thought they were playing chess while I was playing checkers, but they were about to learn that I'd been planning my own game all along. My phone buzzed with a text from Laura. Got your email. We should talk when I get home. I typed back, looking forward to it. The conversation was going to be interesting. Laura came home early that Sunday evening, which told me she'd been genuinely surprised by my resignation email. She found me in the kitchen, making dinner like nothing had happened. We need to talk, she said, setting her purse on the counter. Sure. How was your day? David, don't play games. You sent me an email saying you're quitting. What's this really about? I turned away from the stove and looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. Laura was still beautiful, still the ambitious woman I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago. But there was something different in her eyes now, something calculating and cold. It's not about anything, I said. I've been thinking about my career, and I realized it's time for a change. There are opportunities out there, and I want to explore them. This is about the promotion, isn't it? You're upset about Mark getting the VP position. Laura, I'm not upset. I'm realistic. You made it clear where I stand in the company hierarchy. I respect that decision, but it means TechFlow isn't the right place for me anymore. She studied my face, clearly trying to determine if I was telling the truth. What opportunities are you talking about? Have you been interviewing somewhere else? A few places. Nothing concrete yet, but there's interest. It was a lie, but a believable one. I figured 2 weeks' notice would give you time to find a replacement and transition my projects. 2 weeks isn't very long. Some of your clients have been with the company for years. They're going to have questions about why you're leaving. I'm sure Mark can handle any client concerns. He is the VP now. Laura flinched slightly at the mention of Mark's name, which confirmed what I already suspected. She hadn't told him about my resignation email yet. David, I want you to reconsider this. I know the promotion situation was disappointing, but leaving the company isn't the answer. Maybe we can work something out, find a way to create a role that better fits your experience. What kind of role? I don't know yet. But we're growing, and there might be opportunities in other departments. Marketing maybe, or business development. It was a desperate offer, and we both knew it. Laura was realizing that losing me might create problems she hadn't anticipated. I knew where all the client relationships were, which projects were on track and which ones were struggling, where all the creative assets were stored. Replacing that institutional knowledge wouldn't be easy. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I've made up my mind. This is the right decision for both of us. Both of us? The company and me. You need people who are fully committed to the new direction, and I need a fresh start somewhere that values my contributions. Laura was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with how to respond. Finally, she nodded. Okay. If that's what you really want, I won't try to change your mind. But I want you to know that this doesn't have to affect our personal relationship. We can keep business and marriage separate. Of course, I said, turning back to the stove. We're adults. We can handle this professionally. But as Laura headed upstairs to change clothes, I saw her pull out her phone. No doubt she was texting Mark about this unexpected development. They'd probably meet later tonight to discuss how my resignation affected their plans, which was exactly what I was counting on. Over dinner, we made small talk about mundane things, the weather, a movie Laura wanted to see, plans for the upcoming weekend. It was the most normal conversation we'd had in months, probably because we were both pretending to be people we weren't anymore. After Laura went to bed, I sat in my home office and started planning phase 2 of my strategy. Quitting TechFlow would give me the freedom to take more aggressive action without worrying about immediate retaliation. But more importantly, it would make Laura and Mark overconfident. People make mistakes when they think they've already won. My phone buzzed with a text from Shane. Intercepted some interesting communications tonight. We need to meet tomorrow. I typed back, same place, same time. Tomorrow, I'd find out just how careless Laura and Mark had become. Monday morning at the diner, Shane looked like he hadn't slept all night. He had dark circles under his eyes and was on his 3rd cup of coffee when I arrived. Please tell me you have good news, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. Better than good. I have everything we need to destroy them both. He pulled out a tablet and opened an encrypted folder. After you sent that resignation email yesterday, Laura and Mark went into full panic mode. They met at the Marriott last night and had a very interesting conversation. You recorded them? Audio only, but it's crystal clear. They're worried that your resignation is going to expose their plans before they can fully implement them. Apparently, you know more about the company's operations than they realized. Shane pressed play on an audio file. Laura's voice came through the tablet speakers, tense and worried. This could ruin everything we've worked for. David has relationships with all our major clients. If he goes to a competitor and takes those accounts with him, Mark's voice responded, he won't. He's too ethical to steal clients. That's always been his weakness. You don't understand. It's not about stealing clients. It's about what he might tell people about how TechFlow really operates, about favoritism, about the real reasons for personnel decisions. What are you saying? I'm saying David isn't stupid. He might not know about us personally, but he's smart enough to figure out that his demotion wasn't based on performance. If he starts asking questions, if he gets other employees thinking about the promotion process. There was a long pause, then Mark's voice again. So, what do you want to do? We accelerate the timeline. Instead of waiting 6 months to eliminate his position, we do it now. We say his resignation created an opportunity to restructure, and we eliminate the other positions at the same time. What about severance? If we fire people right after they try to quit, it's going to look suspicious. We'll call it a voluntary layoff, offer a small severance package, make it seem like we're being generous. Shane paused the recording. It gets better. Listen to this part. Mark's voice continued. What about the expense reports? If there's an investigation into personnel decisions, someone might start looking at other company records. You need to clean that up immediately. Delete anything that can't be explained as legitimate business expenses. I've already taken care of most of it, but there are some credit card statements that might be problematic. Handle it, Mark. We're too close to let something stupid derail everything. Shane stopped the recording and looked at me. They just confessed to conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of evidence. This recording alone would be enough to destroy both of them. Is it admissible in court? Probably not, since it was recorded without their consent. But it doesn't need to be. We're not going to court. We're going to the board of directors. I leaned back in the booth, feeling that familiar cold focus settling over me. Everything was falling into place exactly as I'd hoped. What's our timeline? They're planning to move fast. Based on what I heard, they want to implement the layoffs by the end of this week. That means we have maybe 3 days to act. Then we better get started. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. I'm going to call Richard Morrison. Shane raised an eyebrow. The chairman of TechFlow's board? Laura doesn't know this, but Richard and I served on a non-profit board together 2 years ago. We developed a pretty good working relationship. I found Richard's number and showed it to Shane. He's old school, believes in integrity and ethical business practices. If anyone's going to take this seriously, it's him. What are you going to tell him? The truth. That I've discovered evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy within the company leadership, and I think the board needs to know about it immediately. I dialed Richard's number. He answered on the second ring. David Harper. This is a pleasant surprise. How are you? I'm well, Richard, but I'm calling about a serious matter. I've discovered some information about TechFlow that I think you and the board need to know about immediately. There was a pause. What kind of information? The kind that could expose the company to significant legal and financial liability if it's not addressed quickly. I'd prefer not to discuss details over the phone, but I have documentation of fraudulent expense reports, conspiracy to manipulate personnel decisions, and evidence of an inappropriate relationship between senior executives. Another pause. Longer. This time. These are serious allegations, David. You understand that? I do. And I wouldn't be making them if I wasn't absolutely certain of my facts. Can you be at my office at 2 o'clock this afternoon? I'll be there. And David? Bring everything you've got. If what you're telling me is true, we're going to need to act quickly. I hung up and looked at Shane. Game time. You sure about this? Once you make these accusations, there's no going back. Even if you're right, Laura's going to know you were behind it. I thought about the recording we'd just heard, about Laura and Mark planning to destroy the careers of innocent employees to cover their own tracks. I thought about 8 years of marriage reduced to a cold calculation of corporate advantage. I'm sure, I said. It's time to finish this. Richard Morrison's office was everything you'd expect from the chairman of a tech company's board. Mahogany furniture, expensive artwork, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with business biographies and leadership manuals. But Richard himself was surprisingly down-to-earth. A 60-something former Marine who'd built his fortune in manufacturing before moving into tech investments. David, you look like hell, he said, shaking my hand and gesturing toward a leather chair across from his desk. It's been a difficult few weeks. I imagine so. Now tell me exactly what you've discovered. For the next hour, I laid out everything. The affair between Laura and Mark, the manipulated promotion process, the planned layoffs, the embezzled expense reports, and the conspiracy to cover it all up. Richard listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. This is damning stuff, David. But I have to ask, how did you obtain some of this information? The recordings, the computer files, the financial records? I'd prepared for this question. Some of it came through normal observation, seeing Laura and Mark together, noticing changes in their behavior. Some came from a private investigator I hired to document what I suspected was an extramarital affair. And some came from documents that were left accessible at a party where I was an invited guest. The legality of the recordings might be questionable, but everything else sounds like it was obtained through legitimate means. Richard set down his pen and looked at me directly. What do you want the board to do with this information? I want a full investigation. I want Laura and Mark suspended pending the outcome of that investigation. And I want the planned layoffs halted until the board can determine whether they're based on legitimate business needs or personal vendettas. And what do you want for yourself? It was a fair question. I want my reputation cleared. I wanted on record that my demotion was not based on performance issues or attitude problems, but on a conspiracy between the CEO and her boyfriend to manipulate company personnel for their own benefit. Richard nodded slowly. I'm going to need copies of everything you've shown me, and I'm going to need you to present this information to the full board. When? Tonight. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for 7 o'clock. Can you be here? I'll be here. Good. And David, you might want to prepare yourself for what comes next. If the board acts on this information, it's going to get ugly very quickly. I drove home with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. In a few hours, everything would be out in the open. Laura would know that I'd discovered her affair, her conspiracy with Mark, and her plans to destroy my career. There would be no going back to the pretense of a normal marriage. But as I pulled into my driveway, I realized I was okay with that. The marriage had been over the moment Laura decided to betray everything we'd built together. I was just making it official. Laura's car was in the garage, which meant she was home early again. I found her in the kitchen, making dinner and humming to herself. She seemed genuinely happy, probably because she thought her problems were solved. "You're home early," she said, smiling at me. "How was your day?" "Productive. Very productive." I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down at the kitchen table. "How about you? Anything interesting happen at the office?" "Just the usual Monday chaos. Oh, and I talked to Mark about your resignation. He's disappointed to see you go, but he understands your decision." "I'm sure he does." Laura glanced at me, perhaps picking up on something in my tone. "David, are you okay? You seem different." "I'm fine. Just thinking about the future." "Well, I hope you know that whatever happens with work, it doesn't change anything between us personally. We can get through this." I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and wondered if she actually believed what she was saying, or if she was just trying to convince herself. "Laura," I said quietly, "do you remember what you said to me on our wedding day? About always being honest with each other, no matter what." She stopped stirring the sauce and turned to face me. "Of course I remember. Do you still believe that? About honesty being the foundation of our relationship?" "Yes, absolutely. Why are you asking?" I finished my wine and stood up. "No reason. Just thinking about promises and whether people really mean them when they make them." I headed upstairs to change clothes, leaving Laura standing in the kitchen with a confused expression. In a few hours, she'd understand exactly what I meant. The board meeting was going to be very interesting. The emergency board meeting lasted 3 hours. By the time it was over, Laura had been suspended as CEO pending a full investigation, Mark had been terminated for cause, and I'd been offered a position as interim creative director with a salary of $90,000, more than I'd ever asked for in the first place. The investigation took 6 weeks. When it was finished, Laura was forced to resign and forfeit her stock options. Mark was charged with embezzlement and fraud. The other employees who'd been targeted for layoffs kept their jobs and received apologies from the board. Laura and I divorced quietly. She moved to another state and started a consulting business. I heard through mutual friends that it wasn't going well. Mark spent 18 months in minimum security prison and now works as a sales associate at an electronics store. According to Shane, who still keeps tabs on these things, he's not very good at it. As for me, I'm still at TechFlow, now as Senior Vice President of Creative Operations, the position Mark thought he was going to keep. The company is doing better than ever, and I've hired 3 new employees to handle our expanding client base. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how everything went down, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The answer is no. Laura and Mark made their choices, and I made mine. They chose betrayal, fraud, and conspiracy. I chose truth, evidence, and justice. The funny thing about raises is that you don't always get the one you expect. Sometimes you get something better. Sometimes you get revenge. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very smart, you get both. I learned that the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even. And the most satisfying victories are the ones your enemies never see coming until it's too late to stop them. Laura thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was right about one thing. I was playing a different game entirely. I was playing for keeps, and I won.